Hello, I'm Representative Ralph Boehm, and welcome to District 18. For those who don't know, we are in New Hampshire Senate District 18, which includes Litchfield and Manchester Wards 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And on this show, over the next months or so, we'll be discussing politics, legislation, local issues, etc. My first guest for this show is another state representative from District 18, Victoria Sullivan from Manchester Ward 9. So welcome to my first show, Victoria.
Thank you. I'm actually District 16.
Victoria served with me on the House Education Committee, but tonight we'll be discussing a few other things, including the New Hampshire Health Protection Program, also known as Medicaid expansion, the drug problem, and if we have some time, some education bills. So first on Medicaid expansion. And Victoria, I know our time is limited, but what is wrong with this law?
What isn't? So this was supposed to sunset and no longer be a burden to the taxpayers. However, we had legislation come through that has now expanded this for another 2 years with another theoretical sunset. However, the stipulation for a work requirement was removed in an amendment. So now you have able-bodied adults between the ages of 18 and 64 who will be on taxpayer-funded health care. So that's the problem. Meanwhile, we've got seniors that are on Medicaid that have expenses going up, and their Social Security is not matching those increases. So there's a lot of problems with this. Also, the federal funding that this is based on is, word is, it may not be as stable as was once thought, but either way, state-funded or federally funded, I think people need to remember that the only funding comes from we the people, and the government does not have a job. They do not sell anything or manufacture anything, and it's the taxpayers that are on the hook for this. And again, we're talking about able-bodied people without children who are able to work for a living.
Right, and the thing is, it's if they don't work, I mean, they can work, but as long as they don't work more than 30 hours, they can be covered. Now, that was the whole thing with Obamacare. Everybody's going to be covered. We can go online and go on into and get our insurance. Unfortunately, I guess that was another lie, because here we in the state are going to be paying for that. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons, and one of the ways it's going to be paid for, because I know there's been articles written by other people about it's not going to cost us anything. Because it's going to be paid for by the federal government, which we know how that works, and what I've heard is being taken out of the next budget already.
And don't forget, the hospitals are going to eat the other costs, and the insurance company is going to eat the other costs. And I think anybody who's been around over the last 6 years that has private insurance knows that other cost is not eaten by those companies, but they're passed down to the people that are paying for the private insurance. So in my own household, over the past 4 years, we've seen an increase of almost $300 per month in our premiums. Meanwhile, our benefits have gone down to cover the costs the insurance companies are not eating, because they won't. And we're going to see the same thing in the hospitals. The other problem is a lot of companies now are not going to offer a 40-hour work week. They're going to keep it below the 30 hours so these people can be on the Medicaid expansion, and they don't have to incur the costs.
Yeah, because that was one of the problems. Oh, yeah, the insurance company's going to pay for this with donations from a premium, basically a premium tax, what it comes down to, and hospitals also. But you know how that works. Insurance companies are there to make money for their stockholders, which could be you and me or whoever owns stock. So their donations are going to be passed on as premium increases. The hospital, quote, donations are going to be passed on by higher increases, which for the insurance companies. So we got this thing that
and
going to be stuck.
The other argument that people used in order to pass it was that it was going to reduce the strain on emergency rooms. And we found in the 2 years that it's already existed that has not been the case. In fact, people are using emergency rooms more than ever because now it's paid for.
Right, and the problem is they can't find doctors to start with. One of the things with Obamacare, because my doctor told me, he's limited on how many patients he can have.
Right.
And he's been told, you have too many patients. And there aren't that many more doctors in the state that can handle all these 47,000 people that are going to be covered. So they're still all going to go to the emergency room.
And the bottom line is the federal government is not good at taking care of much. They're not good at running. I mean, if you look at the VA hospitals and the problems that we're seeing there, and these are serious, serious issues. We've got people dying on wait lists locally because the government they don't run things well. They don't even run the government well, never mind getting them to run hospitals or your medical care. It's not what they should be doing. And like I said, we see it in the VA, and we have horrific stories coming out of the VA. And we've had senators, we had Congressman Ginta, we had Senator Rand Paul. A lot of people came out and wanted to hold these people accountable, and nothing could happen to them because they were government employees and they were completely protected. Meanwhile, our veterans, who we should be protecting the most, are not getting the care that they not only deserve, but many of these veterans need the care because of their service, and we're not taking care of them. Right. So it's a bad deal for the state. It's a bad deal. We've seen it in the states that already passed Medicaid expansion, and we see that we had people come from other states governments to say, hey, we did this in our state and it's a really bad deal and we're struggling because of it.
Yeah, I believe Maine.
Yeah.
There are 19 other states that have not done the Medicaid expansion because they see what's going to happen. Also, part of this law, which is now a law because the governor signed it, is if the federal government doesn't do the percentages they say, this law will cease in 100. It used to be immediately, but now it's 180 days. You know what that means? That means 6 months to get the legislature to do something else. So just like it was supposed to sunset, and we know what's going to happen.
So who pays the bill for 180 days for 50,000 people that are on it?
Right. So that's and the state will notify those people you will no longer be covered. Yeah.
I had people come to me that had one family in particular. They got help through one of the private hospitals. They were on a sliding scale, and they would make payments to the hospital. It worked out really well for them. When the Medicaid expansion first came in, the hospital no longer offered that plan. They were kicked onto Medicaid expansion where they didn't want to be. They were willing to pay their fair share. They just needed a little help getting there. And they were really upset this happened. I also had college students, you saw it across the country, that were pushed onto this. There was a law student that came out. She said, I have money, but I don't have insurance because I'm a student. And I've always paid my own insurance, and now they're telling me I have to have Medicaid expansion. And colleges used to offer, a limited health care. Because even when you're young, you don't need it so much. But that option was taken away from them with the Obamacare and the Medicaid. So
yeah, there are some holes even in New Hampshire was always a law about, before Obamacare started, about if you're under 26, you can be on your parents. That was law in New Hampshire before Obamacare. There's still a problem with that. There are some people that are below 20, that are under 26 that cannot be on their parents' plan because the parents aren't Social Security, Social Security disability, so they cannot be.
Right, but I think that's backwards. So if you're 26, get your butt out, get a job, and let your parents be on your health care. They took care of you their whole lives. Now they're, they need help. Let them be on your health care.
But the problem is, how many people are saying, well, if I work more than 30 hours a week, I'm going to have to go on the exchange and pay for my health care. So I'm just going to work 30 hours a week.
Yeah, even on the Medicaid. So even if you worked your whole life, you paid in your whole life, and this is what my parents are dealing with right now. They're on Medicare, but it only covers so much. And if you have, health issues, and, my dad's diabetic, and they have certain issues they have to deal with, they can't be on just that. And even the Part B, they pay an extra $500 per month for their insurance out of pocket. Well, there's two of them. But $500 out of pocket every month.
Yeah, maybe between two.
Yeah, and my dad has health issues, so I'm sure that tacks it up. But they couldn't do it without that. No. So now you're in a fixed income. Then you've got your Medicaid you're already paying, or Medicare you're already paying. Then you have to pay your supplemental, and
And
you've
the
got
drug
young
plan.
people who are willing to, are able-bodied. They can get a second job to make ends meet, like a lot of people do, and they get free health care. We have it so backwards.
I know, and that's the problem. Why? So a lot of young people saying, "Hey, why work? I can work 30 hours a week and probably make more money because I can be on Medicaid expansion and I don't have to pay for my own insurance."
Well, you've heard it, Ralph. You've had people say to you, "I can't afford to work full-time. I can't afford to give up the benefits." We have it so that people are now enslaved to the government welfare system. Instead of having it be a step up to help them out, now we have it so they can't afford to get off of it. And you see it and you see people who honestly want to get off the system that say, they don't make it so that I can afford to do it.
Right. I know. It's
There's a
completely
lot.
backwards.
There's a lot kind of fix.
And, it's like a little common sense, and we don't seem to have any.
Nope.
Okay, let's move on.
Let's talk about something we know about. Oh, education.
Okay, no, we got the drug issue. And I know you've been working on it, I've been on it. And one of the problems, and before we get into the addiction problem, I'd just like to bring up a point. That's what we hear. Everybody's addicted. We get all, why? 80% of the heroin that's being sold in this country is coming from Mexico. Because we have an open border. Used to be heroin was mainly for the upper middle class and the rich. Now it's everybody because it's cheap. It's coming from Mexico. It can be easily stopped. We can work with Mexico to get rid of the poppy fields, but our government isn't doing that. So we have an addiction problem. So I guess that's something we really need to focus on. So I know you've been involved with this, so and I've also, so let's.
I introduced a bill, which was House Bill 1626, which was similar to, I think people have heard about the Gloucester model, Gloucester, Massachusetts, where it gave the law enforcement the opportunity to waive any criminal charges if a person walked into the police station or any wherever the community decided this would be set up. They could have a drug take-back program where the person would walk in, hand over whatever drugs they had, whether it be prescription drugs that belonged to them, prescription drugs that didn't belong to them, or illicit drugs. They could hand it in, get that stuff off the street, and they could ask for help, and they'd have a path for recovery. There'd be someone there that could help them. You were a co-sponsor of this bill, and initially it started off as, it shall be made available, and then the Criminal Justice Committee didn't like the shall, so we made it may. So it was basically an opportunity for towns to embrace this if they wanted to, but it wasn't forced upon anybody. And for some reason, the Police Association came out really strongly against it and kept saying it was a mandate, even though it wasn't a mandate. It was an option. And they kept saying it over and over. The police chief from Bedford was on TV coming out against me saying this was a terrible bill and that drug dealers were going to use it to not be prosecuted, and it wasn't even possible for that to happen the way that this was written. So basically it would have been that the community, say it was Litchfield, established a place, maybe not the police station, maybe your CVS or someplace else, where they had a secure drop box for drugs. They would walk in, drop them in, and say, I need help, and they would have someone there that could make a few phone calls for them and get them someplace for recovery.
Yeah, I know. In Litchfield, we have a drop-off, which is amazing. Bedford also has a drop-off box, but they don't have the second step of where can I go for help.
Well, they seem to think that they couldn't accommodate a drop-off box, what he kept saying.
Well, Bedford's got one. Bedford had one before.
I'm just telling you what he said.
I know it. I've seen it. I'm going, wait a minute. I go there a lot.
It was all...
Because we have meetings there, the Hillsborough County meetings, and we have them at the safety annex there.
Yeah, he was saying things when they interviewed him for NH1, like if I pull over a drug dealer, he's got a drug, he's got a car full of drugs, he can say, hey, I was on my way to the police station. I was like, no, it doesn't work like that.
No.
And B, I think that's pretty obvious. You could say, yeah, no, that's not going to work out for you.
One thing is good, and I think it started in Pennsylvania, but I've heard that coroners and even this state are looking into doing that, where if coroners, if somebody dies from an overdose, they're going to call it murder. So then you go after the dealer, and it's now
Right.
murder and that's the way it should be. And it started, I believe, I heard on the news in Pennsylvania, some coroner was doing that. He's calling it murder. The cause of death was murder. And I think that's what should be done for drug dealers. It should be attempted murder if you're caught selling drugs.
Right.
And not like Obama did, who released 30,000 of them because he said, oh, these were victimless crime. I mean, these weren't violent crimes. Bull crap.
No.
Yeah.
And I think the problem is you hear a lot of people say we can't arrest our way out, and then at the same time, the only solution they want to hear is how to arrest more people. They were so opposed to this, and I reached out to other police chiefs that were maybe not fully on board, but we're like, hey, let's give it a try. I'm glad you're thinking outside the box. We're willing to try anything. But for some reason, this police chief, and I hope I don't get stopped in Bedford anytime soon, I'll be in big trouble. And the police chiefs association just would not get on board with this, and they kept saying it was a mandate and it would tie their hands. And I just completely disagree with that statement.
Let's use some common sense.
But I'll tell you on the upside. I went to Hope Weekend.
Right, that's what I was
Right. So the Dialogue Church in Manchester on Pine Street had Hope Weekend. So their minister, their pastor, Pastor Steve, was actually a drug dealer at one time. He grew up in an environment where he didn't know that people didn't do drugs. It was his way of life. He was testifying that his stepfather would be doing crack while he was sitting on his lap, and he just thought this is what people did. He had no idea really that this was abnormal. And then he found his way. Well, he became very ill from doing so many drugs, and the doctor basically told his dad that if he doesn't get clean, he's not going to be here. So he found his way sober. It took him a couple of years, and now he's out testifying. But what he did was he reached out to a lot of community helpers. There was a home for families with mothers and children of abuse or of drug abuse, and the New Horizons. There were all kinds of people there that set up booths that were willing to extend a hand and help and say, hey, we're here if you need us. And I think if you go to Hope Weekend or the Dialogue Church website, there's a lot of them listed there. But it was really great to see the entire community come together. I think they had over 500 people between Saturday service and Sunday. They invited elected officials from Manchester or the area to come on in and pray with them and talk to other people. And it was really a great weekend. And I think that if we are seriously going to get a grasp on this thing, it comes back to the community, because you've just got kids that are just wandering out there and really need something to grab a hold of. I mean, the family unit is not what it once was. No. And you have these kids looking for some kind of connection to somebody, and I think that's where a lot of this happens. I know some of it stems from opioid use, from pain medications, and but it still comes from people not having a connection.
And similar, last summer I attended the Gospel Baptist Church for a political event in Manchester also. And there's a person there in that church that also was a former addict.
Right.
And he runs the RU Addiction Recovery through that church, and he takes people and does the same thing. And rumanchester.com, that's the letter RU, manchester.com, and you can find out more about this. And they take people and go through step programs and from the court system and whatnot, and try to help.
And we also have the county budget coming up.
Right.
So that's I don't know if you got a glimpse of it. It came in the mail yesterday or today.
I'm on one of the subcommittees for the Sheriff's Department.
So there will be discussion again about the county court, the drug court in Manchester, and I came under a little bit of heat last time about that.
What I heard, because I'm on the drug forum here in Litchfield, and at the last meeting we had, it was last month, I found out that the drug court is actually getting usage in Nashua.
Yeah.
And the can't think of the name of the place, but there is an organization there in Nashua that it's finally filling up their beds. Also, I understand the state-run hospitals finally got nurses, so they'll be available. But again, people need to know where these things are and where to go.
Right. So this is, I took some flack for voting against the drug court, and I think I probably will again. So I know Nashua is getting some use out of it, but this is what it breaks down to pretty much across the state. There's room for 40 people in the drug court system.
Right.
It's not a court like you go to this particular place. It's not a physical location. It's a system. So you walk in and you can plead down and then say, well, I'll go through the drug court, so I'll go for rehab and, instead of going to jail. So the problem is some of these people have committed crimes against other people. They weren't just caught with drugs. They've stolen from people. So they're just trying to get out of going to jail. That's not ever going to get you clean and sober. You need to decide that you want to get sober before that works. So there's room for 40 people. Across the state, the drug courts are only half filled. So now you get 20. You're staffed for 40. You only have 20, but you're still staffed for 40. It's roughly $450,000 a year to run a drug court. So then out of that 20, only 10 make it through. The other 10 end up back in jail. So only 10 make it through. Out of that 10, 27% end up back in the system. So you're talking about $450,000 for 7 people. I would rather put that money into beds.
Right, yeah. And there got to be, and what I've heard, the Hillsborough County Jail is going to be closed soon.
Is it?
Well, the women's prison, and that's going to be moved, so it's going to be an empty place. And I mentioned that because I think in New Jersey they took one of the empty jails and made it. The problem is people don't realize how long it takes
To get. It's 3 years.
Yeah, depending on how much into it.
Yeah.
And no, it's 3 months and you're fine. No, you're not. You're gonna have
There was a neuroscientist that came out and said that the brain rewires when they use opioids or heroin, and it takes 3 years to rewire it back, so you don't have that addiction. 3 years.
I remember a couple of years ago we actually had somebody come to the State House, a psychiatrist,
Yep.
and came and talked, and what some people have addictive personalities. Any little trauma, and they'll get addicted. With something,
Right.
alcohol or even marijuana, and then move up, because their normal dopamine in their brain is low, so it raises it. The problem with drugs is you keep getting the threshold, and you keep going higher and higher and higher and higher. One of the problems, though, we do have people, and I know some, that will be on opioids, for example, until they die. And we know how that works. They're going to need more and more. The problem is we have legislators trying to legislate how much doctors can give.
Yep.
So we have people that don't know anything at all what they're talking about, trying to legislate, tell doctors you can only give so much. So what are these people going to do that need those drugs?
Well, yeah.
To live. So
cancer patients and people that live in chronic pain.
Chronic pain continues. So what are they going to do? I need to get out of bed. I need to,
Right.
So, hey, go buy heroin. It's the
Right.
stupidity of legislators and the governor too. And I know doctors complaining because I can't give the medicine.
There's actually a doctor coming to the State House. He'll be speaking at Reps Hall on Monday at 10 a.m. if anybody's interested in checking that out. I don't know if it'll be live streamed or not, but you can certainly go up there and see what a doctor has to say about this. It's very complicated. It's very sad.
Yeah.
There's no easy solution. Like I said, for $450,000 of taxpayer dollars, I would rather see that go to more beds and more rehab than to drug
And
court.
Also, no, the church in Litchfield, the community fellowship church, I believe, right up on here on 3A. They've had a couple of programs too, and I believe they're also going to have a walkathon coming next month early for making money and getting awareness out. So there are churches you can find information out on the drug thing.
Yeah,
We
they have a
mentioned
lot of,
your Dialogue Church
yep,
in Manchester.
and they
the
have
Gospel
outreach to
Baptist
other people.
Church, and
Yep.
the rumanchester.com but that's a nationwide addiction recovery thing.
And we also have 211. We have that information system. If you call 211, it's the New Hampshire information system, and say, I need a rehab, they will help you. They will help you find a rehab.
Great. Hey, I
So,
didn't know that. I
that's the
learned
resource that we have here in New
I
Hampshire.
learned something
I think it's
today.
underutilized. Obviously, you didn't know,
Right.
but you can use it for pretty much anything.
Okay, so with that, why don't we wrap this up for this session, and
We didn't even get to education,
we'll
which is
wrap
what we do.
part two. But anyway, so we'll wrap this up, and thank you for watching, and stay tuned. Hello again. I'm Representative Ralph Boehm, and welcome to District 18. And this is part two of our discussion we're having with Victoria Sullivan from Ward 9 in Manchester. So right now we're going to start discussing some education issues. Okay? And then start with, well, both Victoria and I are heavy with parental rights and parental involvement. And I think parents need to know what is going on in your schools.
Well, maybe people want to know that we serve on the House Education Committee together currently.
Right.
So that's kind of education
yeah.
is what we do.
And Victoria and I have, for the last couple of years, have fought for and against bills sort of together. We tag team these things. And we've lost some, but we've won some good ones. We got a good record.
We have a pretty decent record, yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I'd like to start with is non-academic surveys and questionnaires. Last year, I sponsored the bill HB 206, which passed, and the governor actually signed it, where your school has got to notify you of any non-academic surveys that they're doing. And then they have to post all the questions online, or you can go to the school and see them 10 days before they give the test. And a lot of this stuff is against federal law that they're asking the students. But they're still doing it. And that was, parents can opt out, saying, no, I don't want my child taking this test. There was part of that was the Senate added on to it a committee to look at what more can be done, and then we came out with this bill, SB 320, which made it parents have to opt in. And one of the things we're talking about questionnaires is one of the things, and you probably maybe seen it on news around the country, and it actually did happen in New Hampshire, where a teacher has the kids line up and start asking personal questions. Like, if you're white, take one step forward. If you're Catholic or Jewish, take one step forward. If you're something else, take one step back. These are all illegal questions that they're asking. So, and I know you've been fighting this too on some of your bills. So.
Yep. And some of the surveys that we've seen they're supposed to be anonymous surveys, but they ask if you're male, female, what your race is, how tall you are without shoes on, what you weigh, what is your age, not age range, but are you 12, are you 13, are you 14? And then it goes on to ask some really incriminating questions, like, have you ever smoked pot? Or things like, do you have a gun in your house? And these are things that are none of the business of the school districts. And obviously, I think any teacher with those few questions could pinpoint the child in her class that answered that survey. In fact, we had someone testify that a parent was very upset to find out their child took the survey, went to the school, and the school was able to pull that child's survey. Right. They knew exactly who it was. So this all goes back to funding. So they do this so that they can, outside agencies that have nothing to do with education, can go forward and say, see, Manchester kids are doing, they're smoking pot all the time. We need more money for education for marijuana. And then, as we heard in testimony, that kids don't take this very seriously. So they would either answer questions randomly or fool around with the survey, or they would actually organize and decide what they were going to be this year. So this backfired in one local school district because the kids got together and decided how they're going to answer it. So now there will be drug-sniffing dogs entering the school because they're overrun apparently with drug addicts.
Yeah. Well, that happened when I was on the school board. I think in 2009, in our school, they gave the survey, and the kids all took it as a joke. And I found out my granddaughter was in in school at the time, and she was telling me, and some of her friends were telling me what was going on while they were taking the test.
Right.
And it was all, they took it as a joke.
Yep.
It was like, hey, Mary, how many times your boyfriend hit you? Okay. How many times you get drunk? Every weekend. Okay. And drugs and the whole bit. And then I remember our principal came in. He had shocking results from the survey. And I said, no, wait a minute. You know, these kids all took it as a joke.
Right.
And our student rep to the school board said yes. And so, I mean, and especially high school kids, this isn't serious. The problem is they're giving it to middle school kids.
And the
too.
kids that are doing drugs and doing things they shouldn't be doing are too street smart to answer on the survey.
Right.
And the kids that want to look they're a little cooler are not going to answer that they're doing some of these things that they aren't.
Right.
So I think they're not helpful.
No.
They break actually federal privacy laws.
Right, which says you cannot elicit information about a student's social behavior, family life, religion, politics, sexual orientation, sexual activity, drug use, or any other information not related to a student's academics.
The most
That's
disturbing
federal law.
part for me when I read one of these surveys was it asked middle school kids if you've ever sniffed inhalants in order to get high. So most 12-year-olds probably don't know that that's what you can do. And how many decide to go home and try it and had fatal consequences or permanent consequences because of it? And parents have no idea this stuff is happening. Once you drop your kids off, they think that they have complete control and they don't have to tell you anything. So that's why we keep working really hard, kind of chipping away at it little by little. We haven't had a lot of progress with parental notification. This year we tried to get it to be an opt-in.
Right, and we have a committee conference to fix an amendment, but that bill should pass.
And a really troubling part about this was when they had the committee, no one could determine how many surveys were coming through the school. Each survey takes about 45 minutes. So they could not determine how many surveys were coming into the school, how much class time that was taking, and there was no number. It could be 1, it could be 50. They have no idea.
Right, and not only what the surveys are, but what the individual teachers are doing.
Right.
I mean, there was this case that came up from Florida where the Spanish teacher gave these kids these questions to answer that had nothing to do with Spanish, and you know, sex and gender and all those questions, and the kid took the thing home and showed the parents, and the parents, but what?
Yeah.
That teacher finally left the school. I mean, it wasn't nothing to do with Spanish, not, you know, and the problem is, parents, you need to find out what's happening. And back to on these surveys, middle school kids, 12-year-olds, one of the questions on this test was, are you sexually active? To a 12-year-old.
Right.
If yes, what age did you start? Now, to a 12, that means, oh, should I be?
Right.
Same way, I can sniff this and get
Right.
high, you know. I mean, it's let's not teach kids what to do. And that was one of the problems with the DARE program.
Right.
You know, it was teaching kids how to do the drugs, or had the opposite effect of teaching kids never to take any medicine, even the doctor told them to.
Because I've had issues with, you know, as you know, health class, which is kind of how I got to be a state rep, because I had some situations with my son, and I realized parents have no say, and to try to get notification to find out what's going on in the school is really difficult. And so I homeschool them only for health. I take care of it. And right now I'm trying to get them caught up, like, for the year. And we have to do drug education. My kids are 9 and 11. I have to do drug and alcohol education as part of the state requirement. And everything that I see is just say no or never touch it, or it doesn't explain the effects. It doesn't explain how sneaky addiction is. You can use it once and be okay. The next time you're hooked forever. It doesn't explain that it's okay to have a glass of wine when you're an adult every once in a while, and that's okay. It makes it seem like everyone who uses anything, I mean, even it doesn't clarify between, you know, prescription drugs, and it's just too black and white. No. And meanwhile, they're sitting in classrooms with half their student body is medicated. right? So just say no, 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 but let's medicate everybody into submission so that, we can get through the day. And which way is it? The conversations they're having are not going to help what we have happening. And they want to start as young as kindergarten.
Right. I know there was one of the bills that came from the drug task force they had was to every year teach your kids in health on drugs and whatnot. And we changed it in our committee to say should rather than shall.
Or may. We have may.
Oh, may. Okay. And the problem is the Senate didn't like that. So it's now a committee of conference, and health is not taught every year in schools. And I remember our principal mentioned it to me about that. No, we can't afford that. Who's going to pay for that? We don't do it every year. So, and that was the thing said, every year you have to do it.
The other part of that was in our committee, there was a concern that there was nothing in that bill that would require notification to parents, because what someone deems as age appropriate for a first grader may not actually be age appropriate for that first grader. So we had a deal that on my bill that you co-sponsored, it was notification for parents for subject material having to do with sex education, that we would add notification for drug and alcohol education as well. And that was the only way that bill got through, because I made that commitment, that promise. So I amended my bill to say that, and then we got it through the House, and the Senate Education Committee recommended that it be killed, and then they overturned the ITL, and then they tabled it. So it's going nowhere. It's tabled right now. So that means it's not going to see the light of day unless certain Senator Nancy Stiles changes her mind.
Right, yeah. And she did that on one of my bills, too.
And her argument was we had a 1 week notification. So if there was going to be a lesson coming up that had to do with sexual education or drugs and alcohol, parents would get a 1 week notice. 1 week, right? Senator Stiles stood up, and this is public record, you can rewatch the Senate hearing, and asked Senator Avard, who was fighting really hard for parents and for parents' rights, and asked, so what if there's an emergency? What if there's an emergency and they need to teach something immediately and they don't have a week to notify parents? And he said, what kind of a sex ed emergency do you think we're going to have? And she said, are you asking me? And he's like, well, you brought it up. And she's like, I would think that's rhetorical. And that's kind of like, what kind of sex ed emergency is there going to be?
I mean, yeah, it's utterly ridiculous. Some of them.
No, and you know what? This isn't the job of the school. And I am so tired of we hear it all the time, right? Well, parents aren't parenting. It's for the few that aren't. It's not up to the school to take over, because you don't do a good job.
Right.
The government doesn't do a good job.
Never has.
So
and that's one of the problems. Say with the drug education bit. What if a young child, say in third grade, fourth grade, a close relative just died from a drug overdose or something? You don't want that kid. That kid might now have a traumatic thing if he sees something in his health class to do. So that's why parents need to know. This is non-academic. It's part of the health, but parents need to know what is going on in your school.
I think not only that, but I had people reach out to me and say, hey, what's the big deal? Why do you need notification? It's just health class. I don't understand. And I said, you don't understand because you haven't been to school for a long time. Like when we were in school, it was biology and physiology, and it was the science of it. Right. And now it's so far beyond that. And with my own son, the reason I got into all this in the first place was because he saw a video in health class in third grade. He was 9, right? And he's on the older side, so some of the kids were 8. And it depicted an uncle who was having a conversation with his nephew, and then that turned into the uncle was molesting the child, and the conversation went into, why are you putting your hand down my pants? And it became very scary very quickly. And he was really, I didn't even find out from him. Other parents called me and said, did you know they saw this? And when I asked him about it, he couldn't even talk. He talks to me about everything. I know everything. He talks to me about too much stuff. I don't need to know about everything that happens in the life of he's now 11-year-old. But he was visibly shaken trying to tell me about what he saw. And then I had a parent come to me this year and say that in second grade, they were watching a video. And this was supposed to be it was under the title of assertive speech. And it starts off with tell the coach you want to pitch, and somehow it turns into this. And so there was one about assertive speech, and it turned into, again, good touch, bad touch thing, and it showed a little girl with her neighbor unbuttoning her blouse, and they were showing this to second graders. There's a better way to present this material that doesn't put up safeguards, the red flags for people that they can trust, or make them not trust people in their life for no reason, and teach them, how to come to you if something does happen or you feel awkward, but not to make them wary of everybody in their life. It's just it's too heavy sometimes the way they present it, and that's why parents really need to be in touch with their. Because until we get a Republican governor, this bill's never going to be signed into law. So they need to get in touch with their principals, because not everybody has health teachers. I don't think you do in Litchfield.
Yeah.
You have health teachers? I know in some of the... Well, in elementary school, we have health teachers.
No, they're just regular.
Yeah, so they're incorporated into the regular curriculum.
Right, yeah.
The health, yeah. So it's not the same as when we were kids. It just isn't. I mean, I think when we had health and safety, it was the police came in and told you how to, be safe riding your bike or walking, and showed you how to put your helmet on right. And we had fire safety, and the firemen would come in. And now it's just so much more involved.
Yeah, which brings up another point. We had over this last summer, I had a subcommittee, and you were on it, about detentions and suspensions. And what we found out was the number of kindergarten kids through third grade that were being suspended from school.
One for tickling a kindergartner who was tickling a little girl.
Right.
At
I mean,
recess.
that's so we made a committee out of that. So the committee passed, and hopefully we studying, find out why schools are suspending kindergarten kids. And the kid in Manchester, you mentioned that, was suspended for tickling a girl.
And you see it.
What do
across,
5-year-olds do?
But you see it around the country. The boy that was suspended because he chewed his waffle into, or his pastry into a gun, and he was suspended. And the boy that said he put on a fake ring and said he was gonna make his friend disappear because it was the Lord of the Rings ring, and he got suspended.
Yeah, I think. Yeah. One of the
you really can't make this stuff up.
I know.
But you know why people homeschool? Because it's so crazy out there now.
My comment on this is we have these zero tolerance policies, which to me means zero common sense.
Absolutely.
Because, I mean, and that's what everybody was shocked when they heard that kindergarten kids, and like 100, I think it was something like 500 total between kindergarten and third grade kids being suspended. Now, kindergarten kid, we're talking 5-year-olds. Now, they haven't reached the age of reason yet, which people say. I mean, so you have to tell them. And like this kid in Manchester that got suspended for tickling, that's what 5-year-olds do. And he had to ask his mother what sexual harassment means.
Yes, he got suspended for sexual harassment.
I mean, that's utterly ridiculous. I mean, it's everybody was shocked when they heard those numbers. And usually they have to put down on when they send the DOE why a kid got suspended.
Yep.
And the majority of these were other, and that's what the committee hopefully will find out. What is all these others, and why are we wasting time hurting kids by suspending them at an early age? In other words, telling them you're bad.
And I know Representative Mary Guile has been a big supporter of this. She's been trying to put this in motion and find out what's going on, because she wants to know why these little ones are being suspended. What does that do for your career?
I know.
If you get suspended in kindergarten, you're kind of marked as the troublemaker, and then what happens for the rest of your 12 years?
This kid gets suspended, so we got to watch him. Yeah, I mean, there was one case. It was actually, you think of it, how teachers handle this stuff, and I think, one teacher leaves the room for a few minutes and comes back, and there's one rebel rouser in the kindergarten class had the kids turn over all their chairs and whatnot. To me, that would be funny.
Right.
That's
what kids do, so right? That's actually a pretty good leader. Like, they're an organizer.
Right. But you don't suspend them. You say, okay, now
there.
we're going to continue class, and either you're going to sit on the floor or you're going to turn your chairs back over. I mean, you don't suspend. I mean, it's funny, and we need some more common sense by school administrators.
Yep. Yeah. And we had that article that came out recently that we we were both talking about on Facebook of all things, with the preschool that they want to have even, they want universal preschools. They want your kids younger and younger and younger. And they'll always come out and say, well, Finland has early education, and that's so great in Finland. And what they don't tell you is that in Finland, education doesn't start until 7 years old.
Early is 6.
Formal education starts at 7 years old, and 6th grade is considered early childhood education. That's their preschool. And it's play-based. It is not sit in your chair for 6.5 hours. No. And this was actually all about kids that are overdiagnosed in this country with ADHD and over-medicated. Down the road, here comes your drug addicts, because they're self-medicating it when they're drugging these kids at 3. This doctor that wrote this article said he has 3-year-olds that are his patients that people say they can't sit still in preschool, they need to be medicated, and they can't sit still because they're 3. They're not made to sit still at 3 years old.
Well, the federal government, kids that do have special ed needs start at age 3, and those kids have the preschool.
Yep.
And if there's actually room in the classroom, then other kids can, which is a good idea, because it gets.
At our school, we have a preschool with special needs kids, and they're legitimately special needs children.
Those
they
are
have
needs.
physical or mental disabilities or learning disabilities.
But not for everybody. I mean, and studies have also shown, and I remember you brought this up with. If kids aren't with their parents until 5, they're going to have behavior problems.
Yep, down the road. And now you look at children that are put in school, the communities have changed, families have changed, but you used to have someone that looked after you that was a family member, mostly. And now you've got kids that are in after-school programs. They get dropped off at school. They have they have breakfast there. They're in school all day. They're in the after-school program there. It's these kids need to have more exercise and get out and not be within 4 walls all the time. Yeah. It's we just need to
too much
back to the community. We got to figure out the community piece again.
Yeah, and that's one of the problems. When I went to school, we had in high school phys ed every day of the week.
Yep.
And you look at your yearbook, and didn't see anybody really.
And you probably walk to school too. We walk to and from school every day. No, I mean,
But if you're far enough away.
4 miles uphill both ways, no shoes in the snow. But we really did walk every day.
I know.
And then you played outside every day.
Right. Well, yeah, that's a big change too with society. You can't do that anymore.
Of course you can. Kick them outside. I kick my kids outside all the time.
Yeah,
Go.
I know, but they're within.
I tell them, you need to be not within my sight. You need to go get into mischief that I don't know about. It's not natural that you are with.
Well, when I was a
play.
kid, I mean, even
Get
like
dirty.
4 or 5 years old, I mean, we'd leave after breakfast, come back when we got hungry at lunch, and mother never knew where we were, but there were both the two of us, and
now they all have cell phones. They can call you whenever they get into trouble. Do you have to be cautious? Yeah, because again, the community has changed. Where I grew up, everyone knew everybody.
Right.
But you still had the guy that drove through town and scared everybody to death because he approached a child. You have to be careful and mindful, but you don't.
Right,
it's just not good to have them in all the time.
No.
It's very bad for them.
Behind they're exercising their fingers, but not exercising.
And in school, what do they have? 6.5 hours, 15 minutes of recess. We had 2 recesses. So we walked to school both ways. We had 2 recesses. We had more gym class.
I know. Yeah, and that's the issue. I mean, we're talking about the SAT test. If they keep changing it and they're changing the scoring system so you can't compare, which is.
Right.
But I remember when I was in high school, and we had phys ed every day. We had if they prorate look at the scores, kids got higher scores than they are now.
Yes.
And now we look at the math. Math is.
We were 20. I posted that thing today. 25%. In the 90s, we actually had higher scores across the board, all races, than we do now.
Right. Well, I was on the New England Board of Higher Ed for a couple of years, and they did some studies on that. And take the 50 states as 50 separate countries. Mm-hmm. And this is a few years ago before the quote, the federal government's going to fix it with Common Core argument, which Massachusetts was number 1 if they were a separate country in the world. Okay?
Right. They had Dr. Stotsky's standards that we, apparently weren't good enough. They went to Common Core.
I believe, was number 6.
Yep.
in the world. Now, we're nowhere. I mean,
But now we have a common core, so now we're all failing together. Isn't it great?
right.
Now
Yeah,
no
some
one can
coun-
stand
some-
out. We're
some
all
states needed
drowning
it.
together.
Right, and now with only 25% of the kids graduating from high school have good math, I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, because
And reading skills. I think the
and
reading skills
reading
were
too is
right
down
around there too.
because it's just the way.
The reading skills actually, so in the NEAP that I posted the results of, so they actually showed that in fourth grade, all the kids were kind of in the same place. They were doing pretty well. By senior year, it dropped. So the whole, argument we hear about preschool is we need to get them literate by grade 3. We need to have them all on the same plane by grade 3. Well, by grade 4, they're all there.
Right.
And then we fail them again, 5th, 6th, 7th grade up.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the arguments about, the preschool we need to get, and kindergarten. Kids learn at different speeds.
They do.
Which is why, over the years, they said we don't test until 3rd grade, because by that time, everybody's
And kids
caught
learn
up.
through play, and the play piece has been removed. Their creativity piece for them has been removed. They're supposed to now in kindergarten have full day kindergarten, be able to read and be able to construct sentences in kindergarten. That's crazy.
Yeah, right, because I know a valedictorian that graduated from high school as valedictorian, was the last one in the 1st grade to learn how to read.
Right.
Because everything had to come together. Kids all learn differently, and
Right.
you can't. If a kid in the 1st grade that isn't reading good, you can't say you're a bad student.
And then it all goes back to that overdiagnosis of ADHD. Some kids legitimately have ADHD. Yep, I know a few that legitimately do better with the medication, and their parents tried everything else. They needed a little help. But we're honestly, in a lot of cases, trying to medicate behavior out of kids, and we're also trying to just put kids into a place where they're not ready to be yet.
Okay, it looks like we're ready to wrap up our second show, part 2. So I think we covered a lot of stuff, and so thank you, Victoria, for being my first 2 shows.
Thank you.
And so hopefully we'll be seeing you seeing you on District 18 in another couple of weeks for another new show. So thank you all.